Okay, I think we're ready to go. Welcome everyone to today's webinar, Can Your Digital Branch Be Trusted? As the physical service branches remain unused during this crisis, the delivery of digital services is more important than ever. So for brands to be able to survive in this digital dominated world, they must deliver meaningful human connections through the digital experience. So today's presenters are Mark Cox, the Head of Strategy and Growth at Fusion. The second presenter is Dean Barker. He's the Senior Director of Content Management Strategy at Episerver, and Gabriel Pontanelli, who is the Vice President of Asia Pac and Japan at Siteimprove. Look, at this time, I'm going to hand the floor over to Mark, who is going to start today's presentation. Hi, Mark, and it's all yours now.
There we go. Off mute. All right. So thank you, Paulina. Hello to you all. As Paulina said, I'm Mark Cox, Head of Strategy and Growth at Fusion. And I think we're going to kick off with a poll question just to get us off and running before we get into the rest of the session. Paulina, do you have a poll question that we can ask the group? Great. So what do you consider the most important factor for building trust with customers? We've got 6 answers there for you to vote on: demonstrating transparency, being approachable, understanding their needs, indicating your security levels, prioritizing service over sales, and personalizing communication. So before we get going, if you can just get your vote in on this will be great, just to give us a sense of what you believe is currently the most important factor for building trust with customers. I'll give you a few seconds to do that.
Okay, so it looks like most of the attendees responded.
Brilliant. Okay, so look, what's really interesting to see there is that out in front is understanding their needs. So building trust with customers and understanding their needs. You're in the right place for that, because we're going to be talking about that a bit later on. Also can see in there that demonstrating transparency, being approachable, and also personalizing communication also felt as being important to building trust. And nobody put in indicating your security levels, which is interesting. So we'll chat through that a bit later on as well. So thank you guys for voting there. Let's get on with the rest of the session. Okay, so as I mentioned, I'm from Fusion. Fusion is a digital experience and product agency that creates experiences that people love. We would want to make sure that everything that we actually design and develop has got a positive outcome for the brands and all the people who interact with it. We also have this concept as well, which is called bankable digital. And it's our belief that your digital assets actually achieve a return on investment for your business. So rather than become any kind of encumbrance. And that's actually vital to what we're going to be talking about today, because that allows us to understand how customers can trust your digital branch. Talking of branches, here's a wonderful image from a physical branch from days gone by. And you can see customers in there transacting with the business. There's also a bored kid under the tabletop there, hoping his folks would hurry up filling out their paperwork as well. And what's interesting is everyone here has taken time out of their day to come to the branch, because back then, your physical branch was a place that people went to, okay? But now the difference is that your digital branch goes with them. And you can see with this, what we mean is that your brand's website and all of its integrated services are available on their devices when people, your customers, need them, okay? That's the big difference. So over the next 10 minutes or so, I want to go through these 3 questions. What do we mean by trust? How can your brand make your digital branch a trusted place? And finally, how can trust create value? Not just for your customers, but also for your business as well. All right, that's what we're going to go through over the next 10 minutes. So trust is a clear indication of how customer-centric your organization is, and we're going to expand on that shortly. And with that as well is we can see that there's a clear return on trust for your organization, which we'll demonstrate later on. For us and our clients, this is actually an incredibly effective way of gauging how trustworthy your organization is. This is called the trust equation. As you can see, trust here equals the sum of those top three elements: credibility, reliability, and also intimacy. What's interesting is that they then get divided by your self-interest. Okay, so what we're going to do now is go through each part of the equation, the strategies for building trust in your digital branch for your existing and then also for potential customers as well. So the trust equation is going to stay with us for the rest of this session. We're going to start with credibility. In the customer's words, you know your stuff. Okay, so here we're going to now demonstrate to you how your digital branch can show people how you know your stuff. Firstly, your brand is an expert at something. You have expertise. You might be a specialist, for example, in a particular type of home loan or insurance or superannuation. And in order to show your expertise, you're going to have content and tools that guide people towards some kind of answer. So in order to find out what that could be, look at what are the most common non-branded search terms for your category. And you're going to find that more often than not, these are actually for tools that help fulfill customer needs, such as a calculator, a guide, or a comparison. You'll need all of these within your digital branch. Now, the thing is, with expertise, it's not actually engaging unless it has some kind of relevance. So you need to be able to find a means to engage people. And with this, you'll need to find engagement insights from within your digital branch, metrics on which content, tools, customers are actually connecting with, and what they search for within your branch using insight search, what FAQs they're going to interact with, and then also things like what queries they ask via live chat. And all of this data, the best thing about this is this data is actually exclusive to your brand. So you need to consider that as kind of a secret weapon against all of your competitors. These insights will also give you really crucial clues on how people perceive your brand against others. So you can utilize that data to amplify your brand difference as well. Okay, so that's relevance. And then lastly, we have champions. So these are the people who facilitate connection. And we've noticed that for some people, the biggest hurdle with trusting a digital experience is actually when they become dehumanized and there's no friendly faces there to look at. Now, with that, what's important to do is to consider who's actually a champion for your brand. Who can you leverage as faces for your expertise within your digital branch? So if you look at any software as a service company, you'll notice that they actually champion their people. You need to facilitate that same connection as well. And your people can then become content authors, opinion contacts to provide digital PR, and they can also act as connection points into your brand's services as well. And with this, what we've also seen is it's no coincidence that the barefoot investor, Scott Pape, became one of the most important people in financial services over the last few years because he's connected with consumers as a people's champion. So I'd highly recommend taking a leaf out of his notebook in that sense. So expertise, relevance, champions, how you can show you know your stuff. Next in the trust equation is reliability. So this is where you do what you said you would do. Now, that sounds really simple, but actually it's actually very, very hard to master. And here's how your digital branch can show people that you do as you say. So first of all, we have availability. And this is the idea that your digital branch is available to people in uptime terms, so as near to 100% of the time that they can access it. That's using something like scalable cloud architecture to make that happen. And then also available in the sense that people can actually find your digital branch. So that's good SEO. The idea that they can find it and then also come back to it again, time and time again, wherever they are geographically, doesn't matter. And with that, your branch is also responsive as well, because most people are going to visit it on their mobile. All right, next is integration. And this is the idea that your systems and all of your tools actually work together so that the technology becomes invisible. So all of those customer actions take place and no one sees any of the wiring. Because, you know, if you were to go into a physical branch, you wouldn't see all the wiring in a physical branch. So there's no need to within a digital one either. Ideally, the integration is capable enough that you can actually have automation taking place too. And then your brand can remove effort out of all the transactions that are taking place, such as automating payments and document handling, those sorts of things. And then lastly, we've got expectation management. And we think of this as being like a digital service level agreement to your customers. And what this means is that your digital branch actually needs to be performant. It's quick to access and also easy to navigate through as well. And there's clear evidence of when and how people can actually communicate with you and your people. So that might be something like live chat is available between these hours, and a customer is going to get a response from your team, say within a business day, for example. They know what's going on because you've closed the loop on things for them and their expectations are managed. As I said, that's simple as it sounds, but that's actually very hard to do. So there's a lot to work through there around processes. Okay, so it's availability, integration, and expectation for how you build reliability. All right, and last of all, we're going to move to intimacy as a means to build trust. And this is the idea for a customer that they feel safe with you. So here's how your digital branch can help people feel safe with your brand. Firstly, security. Now, it was interesting that nobody voted for security earlier, but what we know is that this is actually the #1 need for people for digital customer experiences. Kind of gets taken for granted in a sense, but it always has to be there. You know, you need to show that you've got compliance systems for people through visible evidence, say, you know, SSL certificates, behavioral fraud detection, or even some kind of digital verification so you know your customers. You know, as I said, you know, we take that for granted, but it's just as important that they understand that that is there. Data integrity is next, and this is all around the idea of what you choose to collect, then how you handle it, and then also where it's stored as well. And then with that, you know, a great tactic there is to implement something like multi-factor authentication, because that allows you to create that kind of data transfer happening between customer and brand. But then also with that, there's going to be a kind of a positive friction that takes place every time you have multi-factor authentication taking place. And that's going to happen within the user experience and provide an ongoing reminder to people that security of their own data is actually really important to you. And then lastly, personalization. So this is the idea of making people feel as if the information that your brand provides to them is actually for their needs. You know, you mentioned that at the start within the poll, that understanding their needs are important. Well, you've also got to give something back once you understand them. And so that might be in your messaging, your content, your offers. You know, the important thing here is you're going beyond merely a transactional level for people, okay? So what we're going to do now is return to the equation as a whole. So we've considered the top elements: credibility, reliability, and intimacy. Now we're going to move down below and actually look at the idea of self-interest and what that does and how that erodes trust. So this is why it has the biggest impact on trust. You know, acting in your own interests, it's because it's the foundation of the equation. It's actually dividing the sum of the trust that you've built up. Okay, and so it will erode trust as a result. So, you know, good question to come next is, well, how as a business can you actually minimize the effect of your own interests? And fortunately, we've got 3 ways to do so. So here we go. First of all, and I'm glad that you all voted for this, or the majority of you voted for this, put customer needs first. All right. And by this, what we mean is that you actually find out what your business actually facilitates for people. Okay, so there are banks in the US for example, that they let their customers pay get their paycheck 2 days early because they've uncovered that they understand that they need to get payday to line up with how people actually live their lives. And personally, for me, we actually bought a second car with a car loan because we needed to save time on our school drop-offs and our dog walks. So, you know, that's how they facilitated saving time for me through that car loan. So you've got to work out, what does your brand actually facilitate for people as a result? Next, ask questions. Ask your customers and your prospectives questions. Don't assume anything. Get feedback on everything that your brand does. We know that digital brands ask lots of questions of people through user testing and feedback loops. And if you do this, it shows that your customer's opinion matters, but also that your business wants to continuously get better at what it does for people. And then lastly, and this is a fun one, is to mystery shop your brand. Okay, and by this, we mean you've got to get into your customer's shoes. That way you can actually really begin to understand them. So something like making your CEO apply for your products, or even have your frontline team, for example, try and get one of a regular customer service query resolved using a particular device, for example. And what you need to do there is begin to uncover every frustration and excuse and where they get stuck within that process, and see how long it takes to fulfill that as well. And then you'll start to realize that actually this is what your customers go through every day. And you know, the excuses are your excuses, not theirs, as to where things are getting stuck. And so those are the things you actually have to rectify. Now, these 3 methods will change your habits as a business because you're going to put your customers first. And with that, what you'll do is you'll start to see how your organization fits into their worldview, not how they fit into yours. That's the important thing, in order to then minimize self-interest and start building that trust back up. Okay, by now you're probably wondering, well, okay, this is great, but what is the actual business benefit of customers trusting the digital branch? And the idea behind this is the return on trust. What can we actually get back from trust being built up? So what we've found from focusing on building trust in the digital branch, through the strategies that I've just talked through, we're seeing our clients achieving the following things. We're seeing them achieve an uplift in sales, retention, lead generation. We're also seeing them get an uplift through customer satisfaction in a net promoter score. People are happier to recommend their brands as a result. And with that as well is an uplift in search engine rankings, because they're more relevant to people. And we know that, you know, search engines like Google really like that as a means to increase rankings. And also on the other side, on the business side, we're seeing a lower cost to serve coming through. You know, efficiency gains are starting to happen compared to a physical branch. And collectively, we see this as your return on trust, your ROT for your digital branch. Okay, and something we've noticed with physical branches is they're actually becoming a real cost to the customer. In fact, recent reports are suggesting that every customer of a financial brand is paying the equivalent of at least $400 a year for the luxury of having that physical branch, even if they never ever use it. So I would be really interested to see if you did some quick sums on how many customers you have and how much you're investing right now, whether your business invests anywhere near this amount per customer in your digital branch. I highly doubt it. Okay, so now that you can see what strategies can build trust in your digital branch, you can begin to find ways to put money back into your customers' pockets, and also to connect with them through the device that they are using the most. And this, for us, is collectively how trust creates value. And for us, this shows the huge potential for you and your digital branch. And we'd love to help your brands realize this for your customers as well. So thank you. And now I think I will hand over to Dean at Episerver.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Mark. Let me just share my screen here. Thank you very much for that. Some great information there. My name is Dean Barker. I'm the Senior Manager of Content Management Strategy at Episerver. Episerver is a digital experience company. We're partners with both Fusion and Siteimprove. What I want to talk to you about today is the idea of personalization and trust. I believe that a personalization strategy and your ability to gain intimacy with your customers that Mark referred to, it's a great word, and it's a word we don't use often enough in business and marketing. But the ability to build intimacy with your customer really is helped by a comprehensive personalization strategy. And what we're really trying to do is move from a transaction-centered relationship to a customer-centric relationship. You don't want to build a relationship from zero every time the customer wants to perform a new transaction. You want to keep that credibility with them over time. So how do you recenter your marketing efforts around the customer? I think you do that with a personalization strategy. And I'm going to give you some examples here of how that plays out in the customer's mind. Just a few statistics. I'm not a big statistic guy. I think they can get really abstract, but there are two that really kind of jumped out at me. Number one is that 63% of people will give up basic information to improve personalization. So there's no customer resistance to personalization. And then number two, 45% of customers have abandoned a website because the choices were overwhelming. And I think that's a very, very interesting statistic, which reminds me of one of my favorite business books that I read a couple years ago. And it's this book. It's called The Paradox of Choice by Barry Schwartz. The subtitle is Why More is Less. And what Schwartz talks about it, the fact is we always think that more choice is better. But Barry Schwartz talks about the fact that sometimes more choice is not better. Sometimes fewer choices are better. Fewer choices are better because it signals to your customer that you know them. And also you remove a certain amount of stress of making choices. What Schwartz talks about is the fact that when we're faced with a choice, we feel ownership over all the different options. And in order to choose one option, we have to reject all the others. So if we have two things to pick from, we're going to have to reject one of them. If we have 100 things to pick from, we're going to have to reject 99 of them. And that causes us stress. And the fact is, too many choices cause your customers stress. And more than that, they really signal that you don't really know them. And so when you talk about building intimacy with your customer, building trust with your customer, personalization can reduce choices and increase trust. Personalization signals to your customer that you know who they are, that you have an ongoing relationship with them, a trusted relationship. It can help them reduce the number of choices and the stress they have when interacting with your brand. I told you before that I'm not big on statistics, but when you talk about personalization, you have to ask yourself, well, how many people are really doing it? Here's some statistics that I found. The one on the left says that 8% of financial marketers are personalizing most of their campaigns using multiple data points. And this is the vision. This is the vision that digital experience sells, is that you'll personalize all your campaigns, you use all these different data points, that only 8% of the people claim to be doing this. The middle statistics are people who are saying that they personalize some campaigns using limited data points. I am willing to bet this number is vastly higher than this. The people that are doing this are maybe just geolocating. Maybe they're just trying to figure out where the person is and show them the branch nearest to them. So this 32% are people doing very, very lightweight personalization. And then the number on the right is the people who were honest. It's 27% of the people aren't doing any personalization at all. And the question for a company like mine, a digital experience company, is why is this the case? And what I'm going to do is we're going to take a step back and I'm going to give you a short history through personalization and what we've done in the personalization space over the last 20 years. And then we'll talk about why the current state of personalization isn't really working and kind of what's next. If you look at personalization, we think it really came in three waves. The first wave of personalization was what we called known personalization. Actually, we only call it this in retrospect. We just called it personalization when we did it, but this was the idea that someone would identify themselves to your organization. So they would log into their account. They would somehow proactively identify themselves. And now that you absolutely knew who they were, you could personalize information based on what you knew about them. This was known personalization. We don't even really consider this personalization today. This is just expected. If you know who someone is, clearly you're going to modify the experience specifically for them. The second wave of personalization came about 10 years ago, and it was what's called rules-based personalization. And rules-based personalization was the idea that you could see what the customer was doing, and you could detect various information about the customer. And then based on that, you could create a series of rules that would personalize your website around what you believed that customer was doing. This is more or less where we are now, but we're drifting into now what we're calling the third wave of personalization, which is really algorithmic personalization. This is where you let the machine help. The machine has internal algorithms to handle these things, and you sort of take your hands off the wheel. And I have an automotive analogy later I'll use, but you sort of take your hands off the wheel and you just let the machine help. But to unpack this a little bit further and talk to you about the difference between the second and the third wave of personalization, we're going to dig into rules-based personalization, and I'm going to explain where this may have gone wrong. And that hopefully will give us some perspective to understand the third wave of algorithmic personalization. With rules-based personalization, what you're really looking for are clues. You're looking for A, B, C, and D, where A might be the pages they visited, and B might be where they're located, and C might be how many times they visited your website over the next 30 days. And then what you hope to do is run this through a set of rules, some kind of logic operation, and come up with E, which is some recommended action that you would take. You might swap out a promotional item, or you might present them with a new banner, or you might rearrange some navigation. And what you're trying to do with rules-based personalization, the idea of looking at A, B, C, and D, is you're trying to figure out intent. You're trying to figure out what does this person intend to do, and then come up with a series of rules that kind of help them take that next step. And I actually, just to give you an example of what a rules-based personalization looks like, I actually wrote out a rule, like longhand. And I will read it to you now, but this is an example of a rule that we might put in place with rules-based personalization. If someone has visited 3 pages in the retirement section in the last 30 days, but have not downloaded the retirement planning guide, show them a promotion item for the guide. This would be a rule. We would codify this. When in Episerver, you use this in a system called visitor groups. Other systems have basically the same thing by different names. But what we're trying to do here is we're looking at clues and trying to find intent, and then come up with some relationship. To go back to our prior analogy, we're looking for A, B, C, and D, and then we're coming up with E, which is the thing that we're going to do. And this is really the state of the market right now. Lots of digital experience systems have rules-based personalization platforms. And there really have been 4 problems with this. I'll show you 3 of them here, and then we'll talk at length about the 4th. The first problem with rules-based personalization is just that humans aren't really good at figuring out intent, to be honest with you. We're not very good at figuring out all the clues that would lead to somebody doing what they do. We think we're very good at it, but it turns out we're not as good as we think we are. And number 2, and this is very, very cynical, but it's very, very true, is humans aren't very good at maintaining rules. The fact is, if you look at organizations doing large-scale personalization, their rule sets are something of a mess. There are a lot of people putting in a lot of rules, a lot of different ways. They have all sorts of different conventions for finding things out. Rules overlap on each other. And then third, we run into rule chaining problems. If you go back to that personalization scenario I wrote out a couple of slides ago, well, that's just one rule, but then what? Let's assume the person has visited those pages and we did show them the promotional item, and let's say they did download that white paper. Well, then what? How do we chain that into another rule, and how do we maintain those chains of rules over time? And the fact is, this stuff can get just hopelessly complex over time. The 4th problem, these are the 3 problems, but the 4th problem is a more systemic problem. And this gets back to this concept of trust with your customer. We tend to talk about the user journey. The user journey, I feel like, is just this wildly overused phrase in digital marketing. We talk about the user journey, user singular. But the fact is, it's not really about the user journey. It's really about the user's journey. There's not just one user. There's more than one user. Now, I think some personalization is certainly good, but if you're treating your users all like they're the same person, then are you really personalizing at all? And if that's the case, are you really gaining the benefit of that trust, where that user feels like I am the customer? They know who I am. They know what I need. I have a relationship with this financial institution, rather than just building that from scratch for every different transaction. I think the vision we get in our head where we talk about the user journey is something like this. Well, we think there's one road, and we're just going to head down this single road. We're going to take step after step after step. Starting here, we're going to get down the end of the road. But here's the truth. The truth that the user journey sometimes looks like this, or sometimes it looks like this. And very, very often, the user journey looks something like this, meaning there is more than one user and they are all on their own journey and they all have some element of uniqueness to their journey. And how do we cater to them? How do we cater to them in such a way that we build trust with them over time? And the fact is that journeys are multiplicative. There are multiple users and you have a bunch of content. And in the intersection between those two things, you have a whole bunch of user journeys. And how do you cater to all those different journeys? Your digital marketing teams are probably overstressed. Most of them are. I've never found a digital marketing team that said to me, you know what? We have as much staff as we need. Everyone seems to be understaffed. Everybody's trying to do more with less. And when you look at the number of the users you're trying to cater to and the amount of content you have, how can you calculate all the possible user journeys? I'm going to show you how Episerver's content intelligence tool works, and then I'm going to wrap it up with an illustration at the end. What we do for content intelligence at Episerver is we consume all of your content. So we take all of your content, we intake it all, and we do NLP on it. NLP is natural language processing. We have an AI algorithm that examines all of your content and figures out the meaning of it. It figures out the intent of your content. We have 25 million topic tree that we fit all of your content into. So we know what a particular page is about. And then we do the same thing, but from the user perspective. So we follow a visitor journey through interaction 1, interaction 2, interaction 3, and we look at the content that the user consumes every step of the way. So now you take these two steps together, we know what your content means, and using the same type of topics, we know what your visitors are trying to consume. And from them, it becomes very easy for us to recommend content based on relevance. If we know that your content is about retirement accounts or about home buying, and we know the interactions of this customer has proved that they're interested in that, we can show them the right content at the right time, which will help build trust over time. Now, when you look at something like this, people might think, well, this kind of takes all the fun out of it, right? This is just a black box and it's just going to work over time. And I hear you on that, because I feel that you want to get in there and you want to work with those rules and you want to demonstrate your knowledge of the customer. But I have an analogy that just I couldn't shake, and it involves cars. This is a 1968 Porsche 912. I've driven one of these cars. They're not terribly fast. It's only got about 150 horsepower, and it's a very visceral driving experience. It's got a manual transmission. There's no power steering, right? You feel very in control of the car. It has 4 gears. So not very fast. It's a very fun experience driving this car. Fast forward 20 years, and this is the younger brother of that car. This is a 2015 Porsche 911 Turbo S. I actually took a picture of this car. It belonged to a friend of mine. This is in a parking lot in Miami. And he let me drive this car. It was amazing. We drove around Miami in this car. And when I got in the car to drive it, I realized it had an automatic transmission, and I'm a car guy and I've been a car guy all my life. And I actually have an older Porsche 911 with a manual transmission. And I was really, really bummed out that it was an automatic transmission. I thought, well, I'm not really going to be in control of the car, and I really want to be involved. But this car is terrifying. It's about 600 horsepower and it has 8 forward gears. And it quickly became apparent that there was nothing I could do to help the car go faster. Me being involved would just slow the car down. The car simply had too much power. It had too many gears. It accelerated too fast. It goes 0 to 60 in something like 2.5 seconds. The car is absolutely absurd. But it just became obvious that I had to let the machine help. I wasn't helping anything by inserting myself into that transaction. So this car is like our modern web presences. We have so many visitors coming, we have so much content that we just can't keep up. And in inserting ourselves in the middle of that, no matter how much we might want to be involved in that, we're really not helping. We really just need to take a step back, and we need to let the machine help. And the reason why this works is something I believe very, very strongly. As human beings, we really are what we consume. What you consume on the internet says an enormous thing about you, whether you really want it to or not. And personalization is really key to customer centrism, understanding what your customers are consuming, what content you have, and catering that experience to them. And once you can achieve that level of customer centrism through personalization, you can help build trust with your customer. So I hope that was helpful, a trip down memory lane, a history of personalization and where the state of the market is now. With that, I will turn it over to Gabriel.
Thank you. Let me just jump and take over the screen. There we go. You should be looking at my screen. Okay, so thank you for that. I'm going to take you through a little bit of a story, a bit more tactical in terms of what we do and how we can help build trust and how the personalization story fits into this whole thing. So look, I think Mark touched on this at the beginning. Your digital brand is really your face to the world. And I know Dean has made fun of stats. I do have a few, so apologies, but they help tell a story sometimes. So look, I don't think anyone doubts this. It is, you know, the digital branch is now your main face to the world. What's interesting is that these digital branches have not only revolutionized how we live, but they can be anything to anyone at any time. So it's not just a product showroom. It's your customer service section is education. Mark also touched on this on kind of teaching and helping your customers learn. It's a transaction point. You want them to, you know, sign up for a home loan, register for a credit card. You know, if you have insurance products, you're also sort of their insurance agent. There's a branch locator. It just does so many things, and this fits with the personalization story as well. It's how do you kind of make it all work for the customer when they are visiting. This potential comes with a ton of challenges, and we've spoken to some of these. You know, there's more content. We live in a globalized world, so there's more languages, there's more people contributing content. There's requirements around web accessibility. Many countries are making it now legal requirements. I'm pretty sure Australia is going to be doing so fairly soon. It's already in Canada and New Zealand, a few other countries. There's you know, there's a whole bunch of stuff in here that we need to address, and if we don't adapt, we're going to fall behind, and we're seeing that already. There's a lot of statistics that show that if you're not on board with what used to be called digital transformation, you are going to fall behind from the competitors, right? So some stats in here, we've probably seen them many times. Half of the companies in the Fortune 500 have disappeared since the 2000s. You know, most C-level executives have put digital transformation as a priority, and many of these are seeing that they have like a 2-year window before they actually get into solving the problems. So going back to the concept of trust, these are the pillars that we believe will help you build trust, okay, on your digital brands. So, you know, your website has to be accessible. SEO, Mark mentioned SEO. People have to be able to find your content. What you do with their data is important, right? People need to be able to trust you. The performance of your website, how fast is it? Security, again, interesting that on the poll, nobody mentioned security, but it is one of those big things in the financial services industry that amongst our clients that is a priority. And then there's the content of all your quality. So I want to touch on some of these. We won't have time to go through all, but just quickly on some, and I'll start with accessibility because that is one that is very dear to my heart. I've been in the kind of website building from agency to software land to client side for many years, and this is one that it's gaining a lot of momentum, and I'm very happy about that. So I want to start with a quick poll question. So Paulina, can we fire that one up? And so this is a very simple one. Is your website accessible and usable for people with disabilities? So I'll give you a couple of seconds to answer. Let me know when we have enough answers, Paulina. If we can see the results. Wow, okay. So the majority said no. Good thing that some said yes, and some said that I think so, but our agency said it was. And that's a very common answer as well. Is the agency kind of builds the accessibility into the process, and we are hands off, which is fine. So that's interesting. Okay, so I'm gonna take you through a little bit about accessibility. So accessibility the global stats say that around 20% of the world's population has some form of disability. Now, disability is in the web space, we tend to think of disability as visual only, but it is auditory, cognitive. There's mobility types of disabilities. There's a ton of it. Okay, in Australia, the number is the same. It's around 20% of the population has some form of disability. Now, think about that, right? 20% of the population. That's about 4 million Australians. Now, that is the ones that have been diagnosed with a disability, right? The reality is that disability is more than the diagnosis. And I'll send you another poll just to have a think about that from just the visual point of view. So can we fire the other one, Paulina, please? There we go. So from visual impairment, looking just at the visual side of accessibility, which is a very tiny portion of it. How many Australians do you think have visual impairment?
Okay, most of the people voted.
Okay, cool. So most people went in the middle, 1 million to 5 million. This is going to blow your mind, I think. I hope it does, right? So there's the official stats, and then there's the self-reported stats, right? Over 13 million Australians have reported that they have some form of eye condition. And that includes me, right? So I wear glasses. I've been wearing glasses since I was in my 20s. And as I age, my eyesight gets worse. So think about this. If you look at just the official stats, I don't have a disability, but really I do, because I have issues with my eyesight, right? So I'll give you an example. I posted this on LinkedIn probably a year ago when I saw this I was looking on my iPad and I saw this promo on the Apple website. So I'm going to pick on Apple a bit, I'm sorry. I love Apple products, but I got this, right? So this is when they were launching the voice assistant last year, which is amazing. It's amazing, amazing. But this was the promo, right? So I went in and I went, oh, that's cool. And I had to go and squint my eyes and read giving voice to accessibility. And then I have no idea what it says. I can't read that, right? I had to ask my 10-year-old to help me read what it said because of the contrast and the font size, and it's just so thin. So that's to give you an idea that sometimes the designer is going to get away and build something that looks great, but is really not accessible. And that's one of the things that we need to focus on. So our tool, the Siteimprove platform, helps you identify accessibility issues and automates a lot of that work. So I won't go into the detail, but I'd be happy to show you. We also built this world accessibility world map. And Paulina, if you can post the link on the chat. This is basically a website that shows you the accessibility scoring across the world, right? And you can filter by different verticals. So this one I just filtered by financial services, and it's pretty sad that we're all around the 60% of hitting compliance. Japan is the highest in the region. The highest in the world is the US, which has 72 or 74%. And that is because there are legal requirements there, and there's also a lot of litigation, as you can imagine. So they focus on it a little bit more, but it's still very, very low. So there's a lot of potential in here for accessibility. Next one, SEO. So Mark again spoke about SEO. SEO is a very, very important one to me. Again, we know Google says almost all experiences start with a search. The first 3 clicks, the first 3 results get most of the clicks, and most of the traffic usually comes from search, organic search results. So again, knowing what people are searching for, and Mark mentioned the branded and the non-branded terms, focus on the non-branded terms. And this is just a quick example of using our platform. I just did a search of, if you can see at the top, it says Australia desktop Google. So people searching from Australia on a desktop device in Google, searching for home loan. And you can see all the related terms that people search for. But what's interesting to me is the trend. So if you look at the line, the trend, you can see some going, kind of went down through the pandemic, sort of March, April, May, around home loans. But then they're starting to shoot up fairly quickly, right? So you can see, for example, the home loan rates. There's a huge spike in the last month. So obviously there's a lot of news happening of the crash in the market and blah, blah, blah. It is happening in consumer behavior and search. So there's a lot of really cool, really interesting things that we can do to match the customer intent on what they're searching for. Another quick stat that I read yesterday was we're all kind of obsessed or been obsessed with mobile for a long time, because that's where the majority of people are using mobile. But since we're all in lockdown, mobile traffic has actually decreased and desktop has increased. So they both need to be a priority, or at least an equal priority, right? So from our point of view, search is sort of broken into 3 buckets, right? So it's your search and content strategy, which is the keyword insights as I just showed, optimizing the website, integrating with your CMS, with Epi in this case, to ensure that everything is working from the type of content that you need to create, and then understand how it's working and optimize that, and then at the end analyze the results, and because search is always changing, and then competitor analysis is important. What are your competitors doing? That changes the ball game often. Lastly, performance, right? So that one it's basically how fast does your website load. And again, I'm going to pick on Apple here a little bit. The website is actually pretty cool from a loading point of view. One of the things that we tell our clients a lot is it doesn't really matter too much how fast your website loads in your office on your awesome broadband. It really matters how fast does it load for your customers, where they are, on the devices they are, and on the speeds that they are using, right? So with our tool, you can test the performance or across different visitor profiles. So somebody in Australia on a mobile device using Wi-Fi, which is the example here, you can test if your organization has customers globally, you can test from Sao Paulo using 3G on a mobile, or from Tokyo using 4G, and that kind of thing. And it's important to realize how fast it loads, and then what can you do to improve that speed. Okay, so again, going back to this kind of the pillars, we only really spoke about 3 of them, and just very, very lightly, but there's a ton of additional information around data privacy, web security, just quality assurance in general, right? All these fit together to ensure that you can really build trust with your customers. All right, so I would be happy to take you through all those in more detail. And to do that, what we put together with the Epi and Fusion is a couple of offers for you guys. So one is what we call a digital branch report, which is basically a snapshot of the insights based on what we've spoken about today about your website, your digital branch, based on the data on our platform. So it includes SEO, accessibility, QA, data privacy, performance, and a few other things. So if you're interested, and Paulina, I think, was going to put the link in the chat. Let us know, and we will put this together for you with our partners. Send it over to you, and the guys at Fusion can help you with the make sense of it and the strategy and all that kind of stuff. We can give you the data for you to make some decisions on. And our friends at Epi have also put together an offer for you around content diagnostics. So again, Paulina, if you can put the link in the show notes. And Dean, I don't want to explain this the wrong way, so I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah, we'll be happy to unleash our content intelligence tool with you and Fusion and help you analyze your content, analyze what your visitors are consuming, analyzing what content you have and where those shortfalls are, and how personalization might be able to help you. Okay, so with that, we have a little bit of time for some Q&A. So if you have any questions for any of us, let us know, and happy to answer some questions. Paulina, do we have any questions come through?
We do. We have a few questions that came through, and if you still have any questions, please feel free to drop them to the Q&A box. And Mark, I think the first question is addressed to you.
Sure.
So the question is there a financial brand in Australia that is excelling at creating trust, or are they all pretty similar?
That's a good question, and thank you whoever sent that in. I would actually say there's two, and one of them I think is probably going to be pushing further ahead. The two that we have seen excelling in this area, Bendigo Bank and also ING. And ING, I would argue, is probably ahead of Bendigo Bank, primarily because they have to rely on digital alone. They have no existing physical footprint within Australia. So if you think about where they've come from and where they've gotten to, arguably ING has done a stronger job of building trust with no heritage within Australia in a relatively short space of time. And also with that managed to conquer, a pretty kind of key part of the market, in that they've got in with a very young part of the market who can then grow with them as a result. Bendigo, obviously, in a very different space as a community bank, but yeah, I would put ING at the front of that.
Thanks, Mark. And have a second question. So this came from someone who is interested in web accessibility. So Gabe, that's going to be a question for you. So how can you justify resources and investment required to make web experience accessible? Is there return on investment? Where can I start a conversation with my business?
Yeah, cool. Yeah, thank you for that question. It's a good question. So there's, so yes, putting aside all the kind of corporate social responsibility side of things, from a pure ROI point of view, the answer is yes, right? So there's a few things you can think about. One is you reach a broader audience, right? So as we saw earlier, there's a good chunk of the population that has some form of disability, and even the self-reporting, right? So in my case, if I can't use the site because font is too small, I'm going to have to move somewhere else. But more than that, our friends at the Center for Inclusive Design, they just released a paper yesterday, I think, and in which they did some research on this. And what they found from memory is that in the financial services alone, sector alone, having accessible websites could reach 830,000 Australians, I think, provide a better experience, which equated to, I think, was $1.5 billion in additional revenue for the industry. So I'd encourage you guys to read that paper. It's pretty interesting. It's by the Center for Inclusive Design. I'm not sure if we have a link. I didn't really prepare that one, but if we have one, if you can post it in. But yeah, there's certainly a return on investment on it.
Thanks, Gabe. And then I have another question in relation to accessibility. So is accessibility causing any legal issues for banks and brands in Australia?
So in Australia, not that I know of just yet, but as I mentioned, it is coming. So we have a few customers in the financial services that are focusing a lot on accessibility. Because they're seeing that coming. So there's rumors of some additional recommendations in terms of accessibility coming at some point, but not just yet. But I think we're in a good position to address those issues before it happens, because it is coming. Thanks,
Gabe. And I think we have a time for the last question. So Dean, this is a question for you. And it starts with a comment. Look, love your presentation, and we're definitely looking to spend more time on creating a personalized experience. But when we're moving from buy journey to buy journeys, doesn't mean that we have to scale content creation. Where do we start?
Yeah, so this is a great question, is what's the kind of critical mass of content you need for personalization to work? And a lot of that depends on how different your content is. If all of your content is talking about the same subject, it can be difficult to draw any intent decisions based on that. So it really depends how differentiated your content is. We've seen personalization work well down to 2 or 3 dozen separate items of content, as long as they were differentiated enough around subject that we could draw some intent data out of that. So I would say 2 to 3 dozen is kind of the lower edge, but clearly, when you're looking at personalization strategies, to some extent, more content helps. And I always maintain that personalization is more of a content problem than a technology problem. And if you want to embark in large-scale personalization, it would really benefit you to make an investment in your content strategy and content creation resources, certainly.
Thanks, Dean. I think, yeah, we're running out of time now. So I would like to thank everyone for joining us today. And Mark, Dean, and Gabe, thank you so much for sharing your insights and expertise. That was a great session. So if anyone has any additional questions or you would like to connect with our presenters today, please reach out to them via LinkedIn. I will also share recording and a PowerPoint deck in the follow-up comms. And yeah, thank you so much for your time and have a wonderful day. See you later.